Speaking of people who need some wins, both of these players are very firmly in that camp. We have got Viper going up against Swidz in the battle of, let's say, the weirdest decks that we have in Europe Grandmasters this week. Warlock on the side of Swidz, that is not just a Zoo, that is a Murloc Zoo. And then Shaman on the side of Viper. This time, we talked about Swidz getting the moral victory in his first game of the weekend by getting his weird deck banned. It's now Viper this time around. That is a control Shaman on Viper's side that has been respected with the ban from Swidz.
Couple things to look at. Number one, you are playing the Murloc Zoo deck. I think there's some fear there, albeit I'm not necessarily convinced that this is founded fear. That Shaman deck's pretty slow to get a start, so if you end up getting ahead on board and land a Murloc buff, that could be game-ending.
Yeah.
But in the same way, if you don't get that lead and Viper has an AoE clear, but your game can all be a bit over. And when you look at Swidz's Warrior deck as well, he's built it in the same vein as like Board Control, Pheno, etc., where there's no Archivist Elysiana, so you do not have that same long endgame potential versus the Shaman deck from Viper. We've seen it lose these ultimately long battles, but it has gone very deep into those scenarios each and every time. And so I look at that deck list from Swidz, I look at the Warlock deck from Swidz, and it very much is exactly what he was given yesterday when his Warlock was banned away. You need to ban your opponent's weird deck, and that's a victory for them.
And shock and horror, Swidz is opening Warrior.
You'll love to see that. Druid on the side for Viper. Malygos Druid.
Malygos Druid.
Featuring a Geppetto Joybuzz. We were talked to about this in the previous week when this deck emerged onto Grandmasters, really, at least for the European region. And heard some players concede that we didn't have time to test Geppetto. It was something that came up late, so we submitted without it. We weren't confident it was core to the deck. Went through some iterations, found out it's a very strong card. And then this week, Warrior players started showing up with Hecklebot. They said, hey, you know what? Versus these weird late-game decks, Hecklebot's a pretty good card. It gives you a chance to, pull a Shrivala and win the game.
Yes.
Pull a Baleful Banker and win a game.
Yes.
In this case, pull the Malygos and win a game.
Now, let me put this as softly as I possibly can. This matchup sucks for Warrior.
Oh, yeah.
So if you can put a Hecklebot in there when there is a ton of key cards, you can hit an Elise, you can hit a Floop, you can hit a Dream Petal Florist, you can hit a Geppetto, you can hit a Malygos. That all disrupts your opponent's plan to an extent. The problem is that the amount of ultimate damage you can achieve with this Malygos Druid deck is so huge that even if you rip one of those pieces away that isn't specifically the Malygos, they can still deal enough damage to kill a Control Warrior, even without one of those pieces in some ways.
Yeah, I want to give a thanks to Frozen on this. He tipped me off to a line that was very powerful in comboing off. And it's, you play Dream Petal Florist, you use an Innervate or a Coin, and then you play Flipidness Floop alongside it. So 2 Dream Florist Petals in play. If your hand is exactly Elise Malygos, when the 2 Florists activate, if one of them hits the Elise, the other one will hit the Malygos in that instance. So you end up with 0-cost Elise, 2-cost Malygos.
Yep.
Massive damage potential that you have. If you hit the Malygos, 6S.
Yeah, if you hit the Malygos twice, you have a 0-mana Malygos, which you can then duplicate with the Elise in your hand.
That's
and
right.
Play all in the same turn for a very similar amount of damage anyway.
Yeah, so when Sottle and I were playing the matchup, we are working on somewhat limited time. I had found iterations of 24 and 33 burst damage. So I was making it a point to apply a lot of pressure against Sottle in the matchups where being out of range of burst was a partial goal. When I got tipped off to the Dream Petal Florist extra mana Floop line, that opened up a world of possibilities. The double Malygos on just Moonfires is 44. If you tack in a swipe to that, you're looking at 58 damage with 4 Moonfires, swipe, and 2 Malygos. For Viper, it is a hunt for card draw, though, very much like Boston was hunting for in the previous game, and he's under pressure early.
And this is my problem with the deck in general. I love Mally Druid. I used to play a ton of basically every old version of Malygos Druid we've ever had. I played a ton of this version since it came out. However, am I convinced it's better than just regular Quest Druids in the sort of matchup formats that we're facing? Potentially no, because to me, the deck does 2 things. It casts Nourish and it plays Oasis Surges. And that's only 4 cards that you need to be buried near the bottom of your deck to reach the position where your deck is doing absolutely nothing.
That just sounds like Druid to me.
Okay, fair enough.
The one thing that really comes to mind for me is two things. Number one, there's a copy of Zephyrus in this deck.
Yep.
I have disliked the Zephyrus and Malygos Druid personally. For Viper, there are no copies of Worthy Expedition. And I think finding Nourish is perhaps the most important card in the deck. I think finding ways to get in, more potential to find Nourish is extremely vital.
Yeah.
When you draw Nourish, it's a very different game. But when you don't, you look like Viper.
And you look like Swidz when you're the Control Warrior player that does not see his opponent play Nourish on turn 6. That Hidden Oasis came out, and Swidz gave one of the most animated nods we've seen from him all season in response to that.
No tune can hold
I mean, he connected the Armagadillo and rubbed his hands together. He's like, all right, let's go.
His Armagadillo lived, the Nourish did not get cast. The 2 taunts in his hand that are getting buffed are the Hecklebots, the card that he put into the deck specifically then called out in the interview that we had with him yesterday that it was good against Malygos Druid. This scenario could not be better for Swidz.
Look, Viper's hand is bad.
It's awful.
He drew both Moonfires, he drew both Swipes, he drew both Hidden Oasis, he drew both duplicate cards, he drew Forbidden Floop, and now he's drawn an Innervate. The other half of the deck, I think, wins the game for Viper.
He's playing a version of the deck that has those 2 Innervates in them, though. In other versions of the deck, those Moonfires can potentially be, what, Worthy Expeditions, which you can then dig and find an Oasis Surger?
I mean,
or a Nourish, like...
The Moonfires could just be weird threats at the top end.
I know. We've had this whole discussion before, but you get the point.
Viper hit the failure rate. That's what I think.
Yep, and that's just a point I want to raise, is that this deck has a higher failure rate than regular Quest Druid has. But it makes up for that by just destroying some of the matchups that Quest Druid is actually capable of losing.
Yeah, those Hecklebots that's a scare. Oh my gosh.
Yep, they are large gentlemen.
Whoa, hang on. I don't know. Okay.
They're freaking 9-14.
What if he just hit a Malygos there? You can just sometimes die.
Yeah. What do you want to do? Not play some 9-14s?
Who am I to question Swidz? I just never disagree with his warrior play. Interesting spot here, though. I would like to expend the health.
You want to full clear, lose the minion, use
Nope.
super collider?
I want to attack the Geppetto and go face.
Ooh.
Need I remind you, we have 2 9-14s in play. I'm okay with this as well. You can use the super collider afterwards on the following turn.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very into this face part of your plan. This makes sense to me.
I mean,
all right,
it's kind of a joke.
Yeah, now it is actually getting quite funny.
He has drawn when Viper has brought combo decks. Honestly he's tended to draw very poorly with them. That is inherently a risk of playing combo decks.
Yep.
But I want to see him strut his stuff. He just has no potential to do that this game.
Nope.
Got.
Just focus on the 9-14s. Those are good. Those make us happy.
I would say I'm more closely related to Hecklebot than I am to Belligerent Gnome. It's the way the arms are up and the way he's got the yelling face that's going on. He doesn't seem mad. He's a robot. Robots can't be mad. It's just the way he's programmed. I relate. Scorpion stinks, that's what it does.
Resulting to some kind of determinist argument that you were just born to be angry all the time? Is that what we're saying?
Born to sound angry all the time. Just programmed that way.
You're right. I do see you in this stance a lot, though. This is very familiar to me.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That's one of my more commonly known features is that.
Yeah.
Not much beyond that story, just the failure rate of combo druid in that game.
And just kind of the nuts on the other side as well from Swidz. Like the 2 just lined up against each other in the most miserable one-sided beating you can possibly imagine.
Armagadillo is a heck of a card.
When it goes off 3 times on a Hecklebot? Yeah, on 2 Hecklebots. Sorry, let me fix my face.
So we got to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be jumping into game number 2 of Swidz versus Viper. Commonly found this way, more related to Hecklebot than Belligerent. No, stay tuned.
All he does.
Legends say powerful treasures are hidden everywhere here in Aldoom.
If we hope to defeat Rafam, we'll need as many as we can get. He's already unleashed the ancient plague lords and countless monsters. Keep them distracted, Reno.
Not a problem. This plan is totally gonna work. Ain't that right, Finley?
Oh, yes! I have them right where I want them!
There is an artifact here. The name is...
The Scales of Justice. Oh, it must be really fancy.
only to be used in a time of great peril. Yes, I think this qualifies.
Hey, look, Finley! You've lured one of the Plague Lords!
Take this, fiend!
In the face! Yeah! Hey, guys! Get that treasure! We've got a Plague Lord to destroy!
Yes, please, hurry!
Not to worry, Finley. We just push this thing right here.
No, that's a trap! Watch out!
It's all good. I am totally tired.
Gracious me!
What we actually need to do is press this. And there. A fish.
No! It's the Scales of Justice!
Ah, who wants to use it first?
Ooh, I do! Me! On second thoughts, maybe give it to Finley?
All you had to do was hold a rope.
Here we go, blaming the tall, ruggedly handsome guy again.
My name is Tom Val, my handle is Viper. My username is just one of those boring stories where it's a 12, 13-year-old kid makes his first WoW account basically. You gotta pick a username, taken. Is this Viper taken? Oh, Viper's possible, nice, okay, whatever. It's a generic name, it's fine. And then I just stick to it. Being Grandmasters means that I'm one of the top 16 players in Europe basically, right? Which is really worth a lot for me because I always want to be the best, I always want to be competitive, I always want to do well. That's just who I am. I always try to be open-minded, I try to test whatever decks are good. January in 2016 it was, I think. I had almost 3K games in a month, just playing Aggro Shaman and Miracle. I think I've also played an unhealthy amount of J Druid and the Dragon Combo Priest after that. I just love those powerful decks, I guess. Being second at Worlds, it's such a crazy feeling and I'm not sure if I really realize it at this point. Now I'm just looking forward to Grandmasters, I'm looking forward to playing well. I want to play on the big stage, I'm really looking forward to that.
Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters for Europe. We're amidst our third match of the day, and right now Swidz is out to a 1-0 lead, taking on Viper. I'm Nathan, that's Admiral Bolesmora, joined by Simon Sotto Welch, and we are headed into a good old-fashioned Priest mirror match, Sotto.
We are. We've already seen one of these today, and I kind of defended my stance on Priest a little bit. I will say that Priest mirrors are very, very frustrating and just perhaps too turbulent, too swingy in the early game. But it's what we have, and I think there are still a lot of decisions to be made. There's still a lot of agency in those first 3 turns. You can throw matches outright by just making one wrong decision. So it's important to stay hyper-focused for it. And I do actually, before we get into this, do want to go back to that double Hecklebot moment, because I think you were absolutely right to call out, wait, are you really supposed to play these here? And I think we probably should have talked about it more than we did. Because against a hand as dead as Viper had in that position, as he was showing it to be, a Malagos landing on the board that you can't kill when Viper's hand is quite often going to be swipes and moonfires maybe approach is the only way you can lose that game territory. But I think personally, if Swidz doesn't keep up pressure there, he's giving Viper the time he needs to turn a bad hand into a good one. So I personally, like, I think what I said of, like, what are you going to do, not play 2 9-14s is a pretty compelling argument in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, Swidz, I think, had thought about it. I just want, weighing in the decision, I will do it again, and I will do it again, and I will do it again.
Yep.
At the end of the day, if your opponent has to spend all their swipes and Moonfire's clearing, like, you win. They don't have any damage left.
Yes.
That's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. It's just the Mali sticking to the board is scary, right? Like, what would you need to use exactly to clear? You would have to use everything, right?
Well, if it's Mali Geppetto that comes out, you get a Super Collider to 11, hits the Geppetto down to 5. I mean, it's just going to die.
Anyway, I just thought it was worth talking about,
It
and we
is.
didn't. I kind of blew off your point, and I think it was worth talking about. So while we're setting up for a Priest Mirror, I thought it was a good time to just recap. Now,
That face was Swidz. He's like, no.
Priest Mirror.
I don't want to play the sidekick.
No, you play it, because in a lot of worlds, your Divine Spirit inner firing this in the near future. This is the Priest Mirror.
They both have kind of ugly hands, honestly.
They do. This is one I have played. I was talking about, like, you always think you've got all of the iterations in the Priest Mirror on lock, and then you encounter one that you haven't dealt with before. The turn 1 beaming sidekick, and my opponent just plays their own turn 1 beaming sidekick or coins a 2-3. This is a situation that I have been in before. And it's very, very confusing because you've only learned about how the good hands work.
Oh, I know exactly how the bad hands work. Those are the ones I get all the time.
Ah, I understand.
Yeah. Man.
Can I interest you in a nice 1-4 this turn, Swidz?
Well, he's thinking about coin injured.
Now, obviously, you have 3 mana next turn, so you can Divine Spirit Inner Fire if you need to make that trade happen on the following turn anyway, but you have all of your early game minions remaining in your deck, which means a lot of the time you're going to draw a minion that costs 1 or 2 next turn and want to play it and kill your opponent's stuff.
I really don't want to Divine
Oh.
Inner Fire
I
an injured Blade Master.
No, I absolutely don't want to do that either. But
Do you have to?
it's sometimes very necessary in a Priest Mirror.
If you draw dead next turn and Viper coins out this injured Blade Master, do you have to do that?
Yes. I think so.
Well, that's not a comforting feeling.
Nope.
I mean, what's even the best draw for Swidz if Viper coins an injured Blade Master?
I wonder.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is if you played the Divine Spirit this turn, then your best draws just become a minion.
Buff. Like Power Word Shield, Beaming
Oh,
Side.
Power Word Shield
Another
gets better
Divine
as well.
Spirit.
I didn't even think about that, yeah. Divine Spirit number 2, Power Word Shield becomes a lot better. But since you've spent the 2 on the Divine Spirit, your good draws also just become minion, and then you play a minion, you inner fire, and you trade. That one didn't change anything.
Nah, this is just wacky. All right. I mean, you can't do that, right? You just, like, imagine Divine Spirit interfiring here. No way. That's like skipping the Discover a Mech Hero power a week ago. Before they changed the Discover thing.
If you play the Blade Master, you're losing, I can tell you that much. Against this specific hand, I'm not saying it's right
Are
or
you?
wrong. Full heal, inner fire, kill your Blade Master.
Where's the full heal come from on Viper's side? Nephroset Ritualist and Injured. I'm sorry, Circle of Healing. Okay, yeah, that's 4 cards you lose to.
Yeah. I'm just
In
saying,
combination
no,
with
you know,
Inner Fire.
let me be very, very specific. When I said if you play Blade Master, you lose, I was talking about against this specific hand. I'm not suggesting that this might be better or worse on average because I
Gotcha.
don't know. I'm saying against this hand, you are losing.
That confuses me because you kind of did the job for him now.
You did, yeah.
You've limited it to just Inner Fire
Just
now.
inner fire. and you made the Neverset Ritualist so much better because it gets to full heal afterwards.
Yeah, that's I'm confused by that.
Yeah.
Just let him. I mean, if his worst play is heal trade, like just let him do that.
Yeah.
Maybe he's trying to wipe out like a Northshire Cleric heal.
Sure.
Because you do actually strip that away with this play.
Yeah, I can get on board with that as an argument.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's probably the way that you like lose the most outside of Innerfire Ritualist. So I think that's kind of reasonable.
I think the way you lose the most in the Priest Mirror is that your opponent plays a buff and clears your board in the early game. I think Cleric is actually weirdly second to that. Like, Cleric is still super important because it's the best minion to play on turn 1 to then actually buff and, like, get that position through. Game 3.
Yep.
Wouldn't have changed anything because the minion that was drawn cost 3 anyway. But I would very much like to have explored that Divine Spirit, your 1/2 on 2 line.
Strangely enough, had a lot of merits. I was kind of surprised. It's like the nature of a volatile matchup, right?
Yep.
You have to do weird, unconventional things to play for your best draw. Sometimes your best draw is very redundant.
Yikes. I feel like the Priest Mirror is just... Like, when it rains, it pours on one side.
I mean, what? Yeah. I mean, there's not really much to say outside. It's just super volatile. Like, that first swing is immense. Like, it lopsides the win rate when a particular play happens.
Yep.
Like, that Innerfire Neverset Ritualist, from Swidz' perspective, he's like, all right, I'm in a losing spot. I'm probably like, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood like 42 to 45%. You see Innerfire Ritualist, and you're like, okay, 3%. It's just ridiculously powerful when the swing happens.
That's why you see a lot of players running 2 copies of Silence right now, because so many of those swing turns, as I was describing, that's how you lose. Your opponent buffs a minion and value trades one of your minions. The only real way you have to fight back against that in your deck is Silence, which is why we're seeing a lot of people playing 2 of them now.
You know, we've seen the Bonsomni become pretty much core to most people's lists, but, you know, I think back to like Pavel running an Acolyte in that spot.
Yep.
Turn 3 Acolyte. Didn't look that bad in that game.
Yeah, in the majority of Priest Mirrors that you play, Bonsomni will be a dead draw because the game will be decided before the point where Bonsomni can cam down. It's not to say there aren't iterations of the Priest Mirror that do play out past turn 7, turn 8. There absolutely are. It just, we seem to be seeing the when it rains, it pours kind of matchups. We don't really ever see the ones where both players have very similar hands. And like one person just kind of has an incremental advantage that builds up a little bit turn after turn, and then maybe the other player having Bonsomni in that position can flip that on its head just in terms of value and resources. But it's rarely the case, because in the Priest Mirror, as long as you find one Cleric over the course of the game and you're able to get that off, and like the Cleric itself is such a nightmare for the other Priest to deal with in any favorable way, because suddenly, you know, their Light Wardens suck, their Circle of Healing sucks, their own Northshire Cleric sucks because you're drawing cards as well, that it's really hard to fight back and stabilize to a position where actual late game comes into play.
That deck is just so good. Just powerful. That big swing that happens is just massive. Interesting line with the Circle of Healing from Swidz, though. I mean, it's specifically against Northshire Cleric.
Yeah, I don't personally get it, and I don't think I like it, but I kind of respect the idea of, like, he was already feeling kind of dead in the position that he was in because his hand was so bad. Circle of Healing is a very bad card in the matchup most of the time because everything's so symmetrical. You're going to buff their Light Warden, you're going to draw cards off their Nausea Cleric, you're going to heal their injured Tolvir and injured Blade Master. So maybe he just said, hey, this card's bad. It seems okay for me to cast it here, so I'm just going to cast it here and hope it works out.
I think given the circumstance, I would have tended to not use it because I think my opponent's capable of not playing Northshire Cleric on 1.
Yeah.
Priest versus Paladin matchup. We've been seeing the Paladins, I feel like, get the better of this scenario. It feels like it's on a razor's edge, that they're so close to being overcome, but that every time they manage to just squeak it out.
I'm not sure if that's true. Citation needed on the matchup because the two I remember specifically are Fino losing when he had the opportunity to equality the Armet early on, and then Orange, I believe. Was he on the Paladin side or the Priest side when he won that weird match?
He was on the Paladin side.
Oh, okay, all right, then you might be right.
We saw it win earlier today, and in that same match versus Psycho, Psycho won on the Paladin versus Fino.
Okay, all right, then you may well be right.
Those two are facing off later today. Again, a rematch. Fino versus Psycho in match number 5.
Let the pain speak to me.
Dead turn for Viper. It's one of the worst ones to be facing down with that dead turn as well.
Yep. We're back in this territory again. You called it out earlier. You said whenever Viper queues up a combo deck, it doesn't seem to be too kind to him. Double Baleful Banker Shivala before turn 3.
Yeah, you do have Prismatic Lens.
Yeah.
So, there's some light at the end of this tunnel. But, I feel like one of the big things to be happening with Prismatic Lens is that when you cast Crystology first, I feel like it makes more of a difference than when you don't. Like, sometimes the Prismatic Lens will fetch Crystology, and that's something that, provides you a big benefit. It's card draw begets card draw. And right now, Swidz is going to be the first player to really have a crack at that. You played a Novice Engineer, that's more of a cycle. And kind of looking at Viper's deck, he's running with 2 True Silver Champions.
Move quickly.
We've seen that be a large kicker when it comes to the end of the game. And having ways to fight back. So Viper is going to concede that it's possible this Acolyte draws multiple cards.
Whew. There are some big early minions if Swidz wants them with this hand. Very risky line to take against Paladin, though. If you go all in on one minion, suddenly the Subdue is facing back at you.
Yeah, also with Viper's line, I think he fights pretty well against Injured Blade Master here, specifically. With the Consecration in hand.
Consecration, yeah.
Because in the matchup, I feel like from the Paladin side, the times I've struggled most is just they get early pressure and I don't check it very well. And so kind of doing whatever you can to just wipe minions off the board for a bit, it opens up that window where you have to take like this weird defensive stance where you become like a mid-range deck for a little bit. It opens that up to a much deeper state in the game, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. Because summoning the 1/1, like, people might ask questions just about that, right? Like, there's an Acolyte of Pain on the board. Why would you play another 1/1 for him to then trade that Acolyte into the next turn? Well, the idea is that, like, Priest is just a weird aggro deck. They're going to play more minions, so I get to trade this 1/1 into a minion that isn't the Acolyte of Pain on the next turn.
Yeah, and from Viper's perspective, it was much less likely that this Northshire Cleric come down because it would have been there on 1. So if it wasn't in one of the present draws ahead of time, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty likely to show up. You got 9 cards into the deck, and it's one specific card. Like, it's going to show up quite often. And so you have to battle against that. And Swidz developing the Northshire Cleric means less pressure. So Viper gets to take the turn off, draw some extra cards. That Blade Master is going to be scary. Boris said it in the interview, almost every minion threatens lethal.
Yeah.
It's from a hand range, though, not from a on-board perspective.
Yep.
That, to me, is what makes the deck so tough to play against.
Such an ugly spot for Viper here. So many minions in his deck that are just key to play out in order to cycle are just going to get absolutely farmed by the Acolyte of Pain. He has the opportunity to remove the Cleric, which is always in the back of your head. Like, I have a play that's legal and kills a Nausea Cleric. I should probably do that, but it's absolutely miserable against the rest of the board.
I didn't want to say this because this is kind of where my head was going, but I was like, oh, no! No! No, no, no!
One Christology, one Elven Archer. The only failure rate in 19 cards. And of course, the Circle of Healing turns up immediately on the other side of the board.
I mean, the Ritualist, too. I don't know which one's better. If you're going to hero power, maybe the Circle of Healing. I don't know. I think it just depends on what you draw, right? Circle of Healing it is. All right, so Viper's now under a lot of pressure. He had staved off that initial turn with the way that he had set it up. It pressured Swidz to go into the Northshire Cleric instead of the Injured Blade Master. So now that rate of having to find your mid-game pressure has been quite accelerated. He needs to start finding ways to fend off the board and really secure his life total into a position where he can find a clear and then get to the end of the deck.
Glad to see this diversion from the second Cleric to the Beaming Psychic. That is much more sensible when Pyro Equality is a possibility on the other side. Just making sure you have that second Cleric to reload. How many cards did Swidz draw that turn? 4? So scythe away the 4 cards from the right-hand side of Swidz's hand. That's the difference if Viper hits a 17 out of 19 out on the last turn.
Yeah.
That's upsetting.
No use in thinking about it now.
The 2 cards back-to-back with the 2 1s as well.
I wonder.
Sometimes it's just poetic.
Yeah. Game's like, well, if you'd have waited one more turn, I still would have punished you.
Quickly.
Viper just saying there's nothing I can do here except draw and hope this is timeout, and it isn't. Viper thinks he's dead. I'm sure he is. 9, 14, 16, 17, 18? I don't think he's currently dead. Does this Power Word Shield change it? So that is now 8, 12, 17, 18, 19. Nope, still not dead.
Is someone injured?
Suddenly, out of nowhere, Viper is still in this game.
Well,
he needs a draw next turn.
I was a bit confused by this turn from Swidz. You know, my instinct was to take a pair card draw at the start with the Ritualist. Like, I wanted to dig for lethal this turn.
Sure.
You have 2 swap the health into attack buffs in your hand.
Yep.
Like, why the heck did we start this turn off spending 6 mana or whatever?
What?
Like,
I got you, friend.
the Beaming Psychic was enough just on its own. If Beaming Psychic was enough on its own and Swidz has counted this right, then I think what he was doing makes sense, except for potentially that one last card draw burn at the end. And no, it wasn't. He was one off there even with the Topsy-Turvy on the Blade Master. I think that is just a mess of a turn from Swidz.
I just don't get why we spent 4 mana doing nothing at the start of the turn. Like, you know, it's pretty.
I think he just failed to account for how many cards he was going to draw with Double Cleric.
That to me is why the Ritualist was important.
Yes, I agree. Bottom line, he made a mess. I've done it, playing this deck.
I wonder.
I mean, how can Viper clean this up?
Like I said, he needed a draw. He didn't get it.
Well,
He needed that to be a sweeper to go with the Pyro, and needed it to be timeout. So without it being either of those things, he's got to cycle and look for it.
Thin the deck, draw a card, hope it's timeout. One and 6. Not it.
Swidz arms in the air. Like, did I win? Did I win? Did we do it? Mom, get the camera.
The victory is
Swidz, 2 games to 1 over Viper. Unlucky from Viper's side. Mess of a turn from Swidz side.
Sometimes it just be that way.
Yeah. The words of the great Robert Minnick, who said it to me as a young man. Sometimes it just bees that way. Had the most unlucky string of.
Sorry, it's pronounced bees. We've already established that.
He had. It's hard to tell a story. Nobody knows who Robert Minnick is. I never saw him again after this day.
No idea what you're
He
talking
had
about.
the longest string of bad luck I have ever seen in a card game.
Okay.
Like, if you go back and calculate it, you're like, this is literally like 1 in some odd million that this particular pan out happened.
Okay.
And I just looked at him and was like, Rob, that's the worst string of luck I've ever seen. He goes, sometimes it just bees that way. And he packed up his deck and he walked out of the store. Never saw him again. That line stuck with me ever since. I think I was about 15 years old when that happened.
That's what Viper's saying right now.
Yep.
As he packs up his deck and he moves on till next week.
Sometimes it just bees that way.
Now,
Swidz is ready for an interview. Swidz, can you hear us?
Yes, hi.
Hello, and congratulations on your win. A very critical one here over an opponent who is seated with you in the standings, and you've now separated yourself from that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your season and how you're feeling with it. It's a lot like Season 1, where you started off poorly, but you started coming back.
Yeah, so Season 1 doesn't really matter for me because there is no relegation, so it's okay. I want to, of course, go to BlizzCon, but I made a bad score. But now Season 2 there is a relegation, so it's really, my start was really super bad. So I really need to prac all the day. I prac every time, and now I feel a bit better because I'm on a win streak, so it's good. Yeah.
so what would you say is your win rate with your version of Warrior versus Malagos Druid?
It's it's a bad matchup for Warrior, obviously, but I don't know. I play. He didn't draw Meteor for my Arma or the Oasis 5/5 for clean the big boy.
Mm-hmm.
Arma Gedi the 4/7, and yeah. So after. It was over. If he didn't draw Loti to clean my big Eaglebot, super over. Yeah, I don't know.
So
I was super lucky. He drew super bad.
yeah, I mean, he definitely drew bad in that one. And then, a couple situations. I wanted to talk about your Warlock deck. You didn't get to play it this week. It got banned away from you in your first set. And now facing Viper, you had to ban his Shaman deck. Talk to me about what led to banning the Shaman deck on Viper's side.
Why I banned the shaman?
Yes.
So his shaman was really good against my warrior because I don't play Elysiana, so he can play 2 Elysiana with Shadow Walk and Elysiana. And yeah, against Zo it's super hard. It's really close, but I think it's favor for the shaman because he plays too much AoE and he'll spell to heal himself. And yeah, so I ban it. But yeah. Yeah, Madrid beat his shaman, but he banned it. So my ban was really good. Was really good to ban shaman. When we see the free class each side. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you got the better of this series. You end up on a 3-match win streak now and a 4-6 overall score. Much better looking from the start of this. So congratulations on your win, and I'm looking forward to seeing your next match.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I think, personally, Swidz started the season very good looking. I don't know what you're talking about.
I meant record-wise.
It was just a bad joke. You could just let it slide.
It's not a bad joke. Just an observation. Are you saying it's a joke?
No, I think he's a very handsome man.
Okay, well then it's not a joke.
All right.
It's just an observation of that
You
point.
want to know